All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our final event as part of the Data Careers Demystified series, as part of the Unlocking Data Careers program. That is a workforce development program that is funded through the Alberta government. Um, and I'm very thrilled today to have both of our speakers here. We have Peter and Megan who are joining us. And we'll get to them in just a second. So just another reminder to everyone on the call, the 5-day course registration is open. You should all have an email from us to allow you to register. We're seeing some really great pickup on that. So thank you to everyone who's already registered. If you haven't already, please do so soon. If we see a lot of pickup and a lot of interest in the program, we're more than happy to schedule more in-person activities to allow for greater learning opportunities. So our first speaker today is Meghan Pick. Meghan spent 6 years in oil and gas accounting, including a stint in auditing at Sabres Oxley and compliance at Cenovus, before doing a data boot camp that sent her on a different direction. She's now a data governance analyst at H&R Block. Before that, she spent almost 5 years building up data governance and business glossary work at the Alberta Motor Association. She's also a certified Scrum Master. So, Megan, I'll hand it over to you and you can introduce yourself and talk about how you got to where you are today.
Great, thank you. Um, yeah, well, you did a great, covered all the bases, all the technical side of things, I guess. But so what my current job is, I work as an information governance. I actually recently got promoted to information governance and assurance lead at my company. And what I do, especially around data, is if we say that data is an asset, the same way your car or your house is an asset, it requires maintenance and management on that side. And similar actually to human resources in a company. We need decisions and rights around how we decide what to do with our data. And it is my role to set that up and ensure that people follow it. So how I do that is ultimately I'm working through connecting data and the people and processes that make, use, and manage that data together, usually through one of three lenses of data management, data protection, and data quality. So when I talk about data management, I really mean the policies, procedures, and frameworks around that. Data protection, I like to describe it as if IT is the perimeter of what we do and trying to prevent people from the outside of the company getting into the CR data. Data protection is really around inside. What are we doing with people and how do we make sure that people can access that or can't access that information when they shouldn't have it inside? And then data quality is really around how is building trust in the data. Perhaps people have experienced where someone will receive a report and I'll say, your things are 50% up from last year. And they go, well, that's not my experience. That's not my lived experience. So the question is that because you aren't presenting the right data? We have data quality issues? Or is it because the data is able to pick up patterns that humans can't? So I am very passionate about my job. I love what I do. I feel like I get to make a difference in my colleagues' lives and make their jobs easier. But there isn't. I didn't take a normal path into data, and I don't think anyone who works in information governance did, because it's still quite a new and growing space. So as Blaine laid out, I was trained as an accountant. I love. I was very passionate about. Turns out I love rules and regulations, and that makes me very good at what I do. But I found when I was working as an accountant, all all our problems were actually they really weren't accounting problems. They were data problems. People not understanding, okay, when I enter in or record these things over here, 4 steps down the line when someone's pulling that data and doing that, how did that affect them? Or understanding what does a database look like underneath so that I know how to query stuff. I know how to pull what I need out of the accounting information. So I got laid off. And I looked for and the thought of going back into accounting, it didn't spark joy for me. And so I went, as Blaine said, I went and did a data boot camp. I thought at the time I wanted to be what we'd call a data architect or a database administrator building databases. And I went to a data science boot camp. I then the first week of the boot camp, they said, here's how you build a database, here's what it looks like. Now we have 8 more weeks to go. I was like, oh, what are we covering here? So I learned about AI, learned about how we build pipelines, how we build an analysis in that space. And that really gave me a great foundation to understand more about not just what data looks like statically, but how do we use it? How do we implement it? And again, brings me back to where I am today around information governance.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, Meghan. That's awesome. And so our next speaker today is Peter Tunkus. Peter has a PhD in political science. His dissertation had him interviewing members of parliament in Poland and Czechia on a Fulbright scholarship fellowship. From there, he moved into data science roles at the Huntington National Bank and nationwide before landing here in Calgary, where he is now a manager and team lead of data and analytics at Critical Mass, leading a team of data engineers and analysis. Peter's going to bring us the hiring side of the story, what it actually takes to get someone hired in this role. And so, Peter, where are you on my screen? I'll let you come off of mute and I'll spotlight you for everyone. And you can do an update for us on what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, howdy. No, thanks for the great introduction. And yeah, one thing that I think is really neat about my little journey is that, not to sound too cliche, but it's in a way like a culmination of where I've been, where I've come from, what I've seen, that kind of thing, right? So, I mean, right now, a lot of my work involves a lot of facilitation as a manager, right? So it's not just, getting, having my hands in multiple cookie jars with, the data scientists and the BI analysts and the data engineers and stuff like this, but also just making sure that they can do their jobs, right? On the one hand, and then also mentoring them, and making sure that that they're, doing the things that they enjoy doing, right? Alongside, all the responsibilities and all the boring stuff that we have to do on a daily basis, right? But, we want to keep things interesting. So, but yeah, I mean, my career, as Blaine mentioned, started. I'm a social scientist at heart, right? So my career has had something of a winding path. And, I have had a lot of help along the way from mentors and colleagues and that sort of thing. So, just again, starting out as a social scientist, things were great. That was my original dream, to become an old crusty professor in a dusty book-filled office. But when I left academia, I actually started out just as a data analyst at, Huntington Bank. And then through, a few, little winding steps therein, I eventually realized that, hey, actually data science was more interesting to me. And I realized that I had a lot of the kind of skills already that, data analytics, data science, data architecture, I already had a lot of these skills built up from even my time in graduate school. I just didn't know it, right? It was just a matter of translating those skills and reframing myself as a data professional as opposed to an academic, right? And so eventually I was able to get a position as a data scientist at Nationwide. And, got my first exposure to those kinds of, statistical and predictive modeling exercises and things like that in the private sector as opposed to, a research setting. And so once I moved back to Calgary, I grew up here at any rate, I ended up getting a job as a data science consultant and a technical lead, which meant I then had to start wearing lots of different hats. So I was coming from like an analyst, researcher, data scientist, right, predictive modeler, and then all of a sudden I have to now also be involved in data architecture and solution architecture design, as well as helping to figure out my own data pipelines and how I'm going to be deploying the models that I'm building so that they're actually used, and all this other stuff, right? There's lots of different levers to be pulling in data and analytics, lots of different opportunities. But as a consultant, again, you have to kind of wear multiple hats. And so I've been able to kind of bring all those varied experiences to my role at Critical Mass as a manager, because, and one thing that I that I don't want to undersell either is that, especially as a consultant, but again, as a manager, as a team lead, but even before you get to that point, right? You have to be able to talk to your stakeholders, and in some cases to clients who are demanding things yesterday. And so maintaining client expectations and relationships and things like this, both internally and externally from wherever you're sitting, is also a big part of the role as well. So again, lots of different levers, lots of different lessons that I've learned along the way, lots of help that I've had from mentors and colleagues alike. So yeah, just to kind of tie a bow on my little spiel here, I'm like really excited about this opportunity. So thanks, Blaine, for hosting this, setting this up. I'm happy to share my perspectives on, what I've experienced, what I'm seeing in the market right now as someone who, actively hires and is building a data and analytics team. Provided I get the job recs approved and all that sort of thing, right? Yeah. Again, corporate life is what it is. But indeed, be able to talk, I'm happy to talk about the kinds of things that I look for in candidates when I'm hiring, what I've seen, my colleagues who are also hiring managers, my friends, in different parts of the data world, and again, whatever lessons I've learned along the way, it's incumbent on me, I feel, to kind of pay forward all the help that I've received. So, like I said, really excited and happy that this is happening.
Yeah, thank you. And we're very happy that you received such help along the way, because it benefits into a net positive for all of us. So thank you to your mentors. So you've done such a great job introducing yourselves, but I'm just gonna drill down a bit further. So Meghan, you spent a lot of years in accounting. You worked with some of the bigger players, and so before like the data bootcamp kind of changed your direction. But like, when did you figure that like data was maybe your calling? I'm assuming it was sometime before that data bootcamp, but like what was the inception point for wanting to get involved?
Yeah, it was. I think it was from doing accounting, and again, a lot of the times people would say, people talk about how they enter in a journal entry and just disappeared, or my data, like it's our system's acting up, and that's why things are not adding up. Or they say, Excel's not working today, my auto sum isn't pulling right. What is it? That auto sum is not pulling right, or is it that you are not quite understanding the data that you're looking at here? And that education piece and walking people through and saying, no, actually, like sometimes the data is wrong, but if its data is wrong, it's wrong for a reason. And digging into why that data isn't right and what we can do to fix it. So, and I think for a long time, I didn't think about those questions and those problems outside of accounting. I just said, well, this is what's in front of me. Here's what I am. But ultimately, accounting is just a very heavily regulated type of data. So when I started to expand and say, maybe I don't need to work just with money for the rest of my life, I can work on other interesting aspects of data. And that's where I got to say, maybe just data in general. Let's learn the basic. Let's go back, learn some basics, and then I can apply it to whatever kind of data I want to work with.
Yeah, accounting is certainly a specialized form of data management.
Yeah.
Looking into journal entries and all that really fun stuff. So I guess it's about applying a different way of thinking and a different language over top of accounting to then have it relate back to the data management and governance side. So it sounded like it was the investigation part that really kicked it off. Part accountant, part Inspector Gadget.
Exactly. And I think a pattern I see in people who are data professionals and people who are good at being a data professional are people who are very curious, people who like to not just say, oh, that's what it is and we're done. People want to say why. People want to dig into that second layer, tend to do quite well.
Yeah, definitely. So Peter, would you say that's also true of your journey? Did you think that when you got into Nationwide as an analyst, I mean, with this unusual background in political science, like was it the how did you apply like the political science and the wanting to understand the social mechanisms of everything? How did you apply that to your analytics roles? What was your inception?
I mean, it's a really interesting question. I I would almost say that it wasn't just the, like thinking, because, data and analytics, it's very quantitative, right? I mean, it's by virtue of math and stats and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But there's a lot that I feel that I was able to bring with me from the qualitative work that I did, right? So, as you mentioned, right, I spent a bunch of time interviewing politicians. And I would go so far as to say that like a lot of my dissertation research was actually more like an ethnography light, because I was following these people around in the halls of parliament, wherever, and just like seeing what they did and how they were behaving, and really thinking about how they made their decisions, right? Whether it had to do with their voting, in roll call votes, or actually their party loyalty. So like floor crossings, that was a big element of my research, and how their personal identities, their social identities, and their backgrounds factored in.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting about that is that, well, how does that translate into like, oh, now you're a data scientist at Nationwide? What? Like,
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, is that, so real talk for a second. Again, I mentioned at the top that, it was my dream for a long time to be like the old giant beard professor with, surrounded by dusty books.
Yeah.
But in reality, the academic job market is really tough. It's tough. And I mean, you could say that for most job markets nowadays, right? Like with all the change and all the craziness happening around the world, right? But I mean, either way, it didn't really work out for me. So I had to figure out like, oh shit, what am I going to do? Like, where am I? Like, I got to earn, like, I have to earn an income somewhere, right? Somehow doing something. So what does that mean for me? So fortunately, political science happens to be a very quantitative social science, right? So they drilled, like I had several years of methods classes doing all the calculus and statistics and all the rest of that blah, when I was in graduate school. And so really, once I started looking outside of academia into the private sector, nonprofits, whatever, it was really a matter of translating, okay, what do I have? What do I have under my belt? What are the tools that I have? And honestly, how do those translate into some of these job postings or like possible positions that I can work in, right? Because it's a different language, right? Between academia or like political science anyway, versus, being a marketing analyst or whatever, pick your favorite job position that's, data or data adjacent.
Yeah.
Right. So, as it turns out, I realized once I started out as an analyst at Huntington Bank that, oh yeah, I'm actually capable of doing more than some of the things that they're expecting me to do, which is a good thing, right? Like these are things I had to learn along the way. I just had no idea. And so I worked my way, through, networking within Huntington to kind of talk to different people. Oh, how are you guys applying these kinds of tools? Like I would talk to the data science team. I would talk to product owners. I would talk to different lines of business and like, hey, are you guys doing like time series things? Are you guys doing this and that? Like all these different kind of analytical methods and tools that I had learned in graduate school, but never really used as much back then. And, eventually, like once I kind of got more familiar with how statistical analysis and all that is leveraged in the real world, it became gradually more easy for me to work towards transitioning into those roles, like moving from a data analyst into a data scientist, because I could speak the language more. And, as an analyst, I would try to like take on little side projects or like shadow others on like the data science teams to be like, hey, like, can I help do this? Or like, hey, do you guys do a time series about your mortgage lending patterns? And like, so you can see this or that or the other. And they're like, oh no, but like, if you've got something on hand, that'd be cool. I'm like, all right, because I had access to all these data from, a customer advocacy perspective. So why not, right? And it didn't take that much time away from my usual responsibilities. And that's a line on the CV then, right? That I can say, I did the data science thing. Now you can hire me, right? But again, I really don't want to undersell the help that I've got along the way from those friends and colleagues, right? Like I did have a lot of folks telling me like, hey, like all the things I'm saying right now about like translating this and that and the other, these are things that others like really drilled into my brain to say like, hey, you have done this. It's just, you have to think of it in this other way, right? Or you have to think critically about how these things that you did as a grad student, whether it was like teaching a class, How does that translate into management? Lots of ways, because you're teaching and mentoring as a manager with direct reports, right?
Yep.
And so in a way, I am getting to scratch that itch a little bit. Like, I might not be a crusty old professor, but like, I'm a crusty old manager who, isn't all that crusty, I don't think. But like, you get what I'm saying, right? So it's like, so part of it too is just a matter of kind of shifting your perspective about where you can fit potentially, and then framing a story about yourself to that end, to kind of show that, it's not that I just have these tools or whatever, but like, it's actually an application of those skills, and like, I apply to this job, not like in the literal application sense. Like, I can fit here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big thing about what we're trying to do with this 5-day course or 30-hour online course, is to equip everyone who's attending with the language and the lens at which to redefine their previous history through a data perspective, so that they can better align themselves kind of for those careers that are more on the data problem solving kind of analyst side of things. So keeping with that trend in mind, Peter, turning to you, we did some research. 22% of Alberta job data postings require no stated academic credential. 64% describe responsibilities that go well beyond what the postings kind of say as well. So Peter, from where you're sitting at in critical mass, what does that what does that match to what you're seeing? There we go. I finally got it out. Do you seeing a lot of your job descriptions have like no stated educational credentials? Like, what are you seeing from your side?
I guess I see a mixed bag. Like, it depends on where you're looking, and sometimes it depends on the company, right? Or if it's through a headhunter or something like that. It can really be a mixed bag. I mean, on average, I would say those numbers make sense. Usually in the job posts that Critical Mass puts out, that we try to, as hiring managers, generally speaking, we try to have as much of a hand in crafting those job recs as possible, just to kind of avoid things being super generic. But again, those numbers do make sense. Most of ours do include some kind of like, bachelor degree in like statistics, computer science, marketing, or related, right? Which related is very broad and vague, right?
Yeah.
So that's again where, translation and application come into play. But honestly, I don't have the numbers behind this, but I would just add one more little point, because it really makes me think about it. And maybe I'm just stating the obvious here, that we've all encountered and we're all kind of sick of noticing or being aware of. But yeah, I'd even go so far as to make it explicit that oftentimes, just looking in general, like, the job rec titles are pretty opaque, or sometimes I would argue honestly meaningless, right? Like, oftentimes, like, it's just a bunch of buzzwords because they're looking for the newest thing based on just like getting the job posting to rank higher in, LinkedIn's algorithm for, posts that are in order of something or other based on whatever algorithm, right? So like, you often, I would honestly say, like, it's just a matter of kind of looking a bit deeper and looking past things a bit. Really, as far as like navigating that and trying to survive the job application process, is again, like, and I'm going to be saying this word a lot, so hashtag sorry, not sorry. But my POV is, it's just to translate. Like, we can start with education, for example. Sometimes you'll get lucky, and the posting will give something like an alternative ballpark figure. Like, if you don't have the master's degree in whatever, then they'll say, well, or equivalent 3 or 4 or however many years of industry experience alongside something else, right? So you might get lucky with that. I don't feel like that's super common, but again, mileage may vary depending on what you're looking at and where you're looking. And really, when that comes into play, again, whether they state an education requirement or not, right? I would honestly say that, your work when you're in school is still work. Maybe I'm a bit biased, having been in graduate school for like way too long. Like, it was 8 years. So like,
Same, yeah.
It was a long time. But like, that's a real job, frankly. And I don't know, maybe I'm just like, shouting on a soapbox into the wind here. But like, but I truly believe that that qualifies, because even if it's not like, oh, it's not a real job, the actual work that you did or the courses that you took, as long as you can show an application of those skills, can still count, right? So like if you're fresh coming into the job market, fresh out of school, then this can mean discussing projects you worked on, completed in school, or co-op internship related work, right? It might not be an exact one-to-one with what like is listed in the job posting, right? But it can help to think critically about those experiences that are similar or ballpark, maybe reframing them to speak the language of the job post, right? And because like ultimately, I feel that a lot of recruiters, not just hiring managers, but especially like, you know, that first stage where you're getting screened or whatever, right? Or even getting through the ATS or through, you know, whatever talent officer or HR person is like breezing through resumes and stuff like that, right? Framing those bullet points using that star structure, I find can oftentimes really help kind of those people kind of navigate and sift through a lot of the noise, right? And what I mean by star structure is situation, task, action, result. Especially if there's like, and again, it's just a matter of kind of thinking, you're not like lying. Maybe you're embellishing like a teeny bit, but everybody does, right? So again, don't lie. I'm not saying do not lie, because like that will lead to bad times. But like think if there's a way that you can like quantify what you did, right? So like you helped X to do Y Z% better, right? Like that as a generic example, right? So thinking about it is like those kinds of like direct things, like, yes, I did this thing and it actually had meaning, not just that, oh, I know how to do regression or something, right? Like, cool story, bro, tell it again. Like there isn't any meat there. And so a lot of folks will be looking for that kind of meat and potatoes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, you know, it's always important to be honest, but also like important to understand what your worth is and what you're bringing to the table.
Definitely, yeah.
So Megan, kind of like switching to you. So when you applied for this data governance role with H&R Block, would you like, how are you able to like reconcile your past into like this like new job description that you were applying for? And then like, you know, further into that, how does that translate into like what you're doing day to day? Do you think it's like pretty well aligned, or do you think it's the job description was really broad and vague and now you've been able to like make it your own?
A bit of yes to all.
Yes,
I'm lucky. Yes, and I took my first information governance job. My boss did take a chance on me, but a lot of what Peter's talking about is saying, well, you know, I dug into, if we talk about data and understanding reporting, I would just dig into the reporting and just say, okay, well, this number doesn't look right. Why? Go to well, what was my first step back? What was my next step back? What was my next step back after that?
Yeah.
Ultimately, that process is the same, no matter what your data you're working, whatever you're working on, even if it's not data specific. Some interesting things specifically around accounting that translate is we have a concept in information governance called, that I think sounds like you go over in detail in your program, or at least over information governance. We have concepts of data quality, and people talk about what is quality data, how do we trust the data, and ultimately we do need to put numbers to that, because trust is, while a feeling, at some point people need, how do we get over the feelings of distrust, is we prove it with numbers. And so we have concepts of completeness and accuracy, and say, well, I checked all these things according to these methodologies, and that's in accounting and in auditing. That's what we do, is we audit according to a set of criteria. And then data, I approach it the same way I approach any other audit, is I have a set of criteria and I go through. So I think any job could translate in that way, but that's really when my boss was talking to me and wanting to understand what I was going to bring to the table, was just my thought process and how I deliver an attention to detail through a thought process.
Yeah, definitely attention to detail is very important with accounting. You don't want to, you don't want to miss a zero or add a zero onto someone's paycheck, but if you want to add one to mine, that's also fine. So would you say like throughout your day to day, you're still like actively applying your accounting concepts onto your data governance work?
Very much so, yes. So besides just that data quality piece, I do things. So if I may, for example, my day to day, like I said, a lot more emails than what I used to do in accounting.
Yeah.
But ultimately, my emails are still trying to get to, like, for example, I'm trying to understand what happened. And accounting is all about looking at what happened.
Yeah.
So, and taking that data and putting it there. And then further for information governance, what we really look at is two spaces around. We say, usually they bring us in when there's a problem.
Yeah.
And we say, okay, what is our problem? Define the problem, understanding how it impacts different people. Our frontline staff will have the same problem, but it'll impact them differently than our executives.
Yeah.
So understanding all those problems, pulling them together to find the root cause, and then say, how do I fix this root cause with a process going forward? And how do I fix the past as much as I can? And can we fix it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, I think that's something I did a lot in accounting, but
Yeah.
I think all jobs probably have some level of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like you're also kind of a natural like problem solver and just like wanting to get to the root cause. So yeah, that's
Yes.
awesome. So I mean, I know I like to solve problems, so that'd be a lot of fun for me. But yeah, you have a different skill set than me, so I'm sure you're going to be better at it.
Well, maybe, but like I think it comes from the desire to fix things and desire to
Yeah,
make people's lives better, and just
yeah,
what tools are in your toolbox. And as you learn more, you get more tools. And
yeah, totally.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It's fun to do this webinar series because a lot of what you're saying it like carries over. We kind of had the same through line from a lot of the other speakers, so it's great that everything's coming together. Nothing's caught me out of left field yet, which is excellent. I'd love to see that. So Peter, not everyone on this call is kind of starting from zero. Some already have a certificate or diploma, or they're maybe in their first analyst role. For someone who has some For someone who already has some of that on paper, what's the actual gap between having it and getting hired onto a team, generalized, not specifically your team, but what do you think is that actual gap between having it and getting hired?
Yeah, so again, I don't want to hedge too much, but I do want to preface that, I mean, I am giving this from my perspective about what I
Yeah, of course.
look for. But these are things that, I would also espouse myself, like, whenever I've looked for work and, I've been on the market myself, right? And so I find that the gap lies in two places, right? So one is, again, translation and thinking critically about those applied examples, both in terms of like your application materials, right? So the resume, the letter, the cover letter, but also in your conversations in interviews, whether that's with the recruiter on the screening call first thing, or with the actual hiring manager or members of the team, however the interviews are structured, right? And so I will say that, given that sort of like frame of mind, I personally don't believe that anybody is truly entering the job market, or transitioning from a different industry, field, or sector, starting from absolute scratch, right? There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of reframe and apply, right? Some might seem a little bit more of a stretch to you as you're kind of thinking about these things than others, but where I think it kind of, this line of thinking marries with, the second gap, if you will, is actually something, Megan, that you were talking about, that you brought up, that really triggered this in my mind here, is around, talking about your thought process more than just the tools and the applied things that you did, but like, how did you get to that point? Why did you do the things that you did?
Yeah.
Right. And how did that lead to, whatever results or so that you're looking to kind of advertise, right? Alongside, your ability to balance out the attention to detail. Again, using your words, Megan, I thought it was brilliant, right? Is that attention to detail, but also without losing sight of the broader narrative, right? So like the overall story that again, whether you're trying to tell a story in response to a question or specifically directed towards answering that question per se, right? So another way to think about it is like, couch, like, why are we here? That's very broad, right? But
Yeah.
then how are the things that we're doing right now matter towards answering the question why we are here, right? Because like, it's almost like there's two different layers there, right? There's the broad story and then like all the little details and bits and pieces that we're excited to talk about, right? But all those little things are meant, or they should be meant, to culminate, to come together in helping to define and, color or fill in that broader story or that broader picture.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the metacognition part for sure. Thinking about how you think. Are they still teaching that in school these days? I haven't been through high school for a long time.
I mean, that was grad school for me in political theory and stuff. So
they taught us metacognition in high school. Like, I would think maybe even junior high. I remember having to like come home and like have long conversations with my mom about what is metacognition, and now it's like
in junior high, you were lucky if I was getting one cognition. Oh, metacognition, like, no, good luck.
Yeah, I think that's a good takeaway for all the attendees. Look into metacognition so that you can better understand the way you think about how you think about things. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. So Meghan, you off script question here for you, but so we know that you have a great background in accounting, and so you've been on a few different data teams, I assume, right now with AMA and with H&R Block. What are some other professions that your colleagues maybe have come from or transitioned from into, like, to get into data? Like, what are some examples of how someone has pivoted that you're aware of or know?
Sure. I think genuinely, I think the most common one, so I see a lot in all three of those spaces, is the people who did really well were people who were out in the field, people who were very in touch with the processes and the human side of what that data represents and how that data gets translated from. When you think about a transaction, like at AMA, we all have purchases, or HR Block, again, we have purchases. People come in, drop off their taxes, they purchase something, they bring it back. What we see in the data is just a representation of what that transaction was, and so understanding the human side of it is how they come into this, and they just want to make things better. And so really a lot of our people were just people who worked in retail and just said, I can do more. I can do more with this, and I can bring a level of human knowledge to this data that someone like me who doesn't work closely with it, can't.
Yeah. Yeah, the human aspect and the application of the outcomes and what it takes to get there.
Yeah.
Experiencing the problem and then finding the solution.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we only have a few minutes left, and I'm sure that everyone's gonna have lots of questions that you can put into the chat or use the Q&A feature. So please start peppering them with your questions. I'm sure that everyone here has lots. So I'm gonna kind of jump ahead a little bit. As you know, AI is kind of sucking all the oxygen, or should I say water, out of the room, and everyone's kind of talking about it. It's like it's really big. So it's created a whole new category of data roles that kind of didn't exist 5 years ago. Prompt engineers, AI data curators, training data specialists, AI quantity and analysts. Peter, from where you're sitting managing kind of cloud migrations and ML ops, where's the real demand heading, do you think, with all of this AI boom?
Yeah, so I don't want to overplay any, cynicism about the hype cycle, but a lot of it is driven by the hype cycle, especially with some of those job titles that you described, right? Like prompt engineers have kind of come and honestly, they're kind of fading out a little bit, I would say, if not already. A lot of the talk is now about being able to build agentic systems with semantic layers and using all these buzzwords that, again, I don't know if everybody really understands what they mean, but they are flashy, right? And so, again, going back to, I think I mentioned earlier about, some of these job titles might not mean a whole lot, and you have to kind of read between the lines, right? So where I see a lot of things going just in my day-to-day right now, I mean, whether I'm negotiating or talking to vendors for, like whatever cloud platform or Tableau or Power BI or whatever, right? Like
Yep.
those kinds of software as a service things, or if, we're talking about integration into, our analytics for the data scientists or analysts, whatever, or whoever I should say, where a lot of the work is going, especially now, I feel, is towards automation and facilitation, both in terms of being able to deploy and stand up those kinds of things within platforms or standing up the platforms themselves in order to facilitate the ability to leverage, large language models or what have you, but also in terms of on the governance side of things, right? Again, Meghan, you mentioned at the top that it's still kind of like a burgeoning field, and it is a little bit vague, like it's very broad, right? And that's just because like the conversations are really only just, I mean, they've only just started over the last several years, like 4 or 5 years tops, I would argue anyway. And even then, we're all kind of coming from different places, and so so part of that, and I know Meghan, you can talk to this in more detail, I think, but alongside the sort of technical aspect of automation and facilitation is also like on the governance side, being able to understand how to set up and how to define and why guardrails, as well as building and establishing trust around those tools. Because we all know and we've all heard a lot about hallucination and like weird rando results and other gibberish and things like this. And it is a risk, right? Just as much as, wherever you're working, like your company's private, secret sauce data getting filtered out into the ether because you used the wrong token or the wrong API token or whatever it is, the wrong platform to talk to Claude or ChatGPT or whatever tool, right? So there are a lot of moving parts with respect to that, and that's where I feel where a lot of the hard work has yet to be done, and that's why I kind of feel that that's where things are going. It's the governance side of things is starting to pick up momentum. It's certainly been a lot slower than, as you mentioned, Blaine, the prompt engineers and AI trainers and this and that and the other, right? But all that's fine and good, but like if the tool doesn't work as expected, then the hype bubble is at risk of bursting sooner than many investors would like. So soon enough, the reading on the wall is going to kind of prompt more of these kinds of roles again, being not just certainly again, being able to deploy and stand up these things, facilitate them, help people to automate, right? Help people to use AI to automate their daily tasks and stuff. But again, it's like making sure that it actually does what we expect or otherwise want or even need it to do.
Yeah. So Meghan, from your perspective as a governance person and near expert, I would say, what would you say? How would you say AI is influencing things? Like where do you see it impacting your work, and where do you see the opportunities for people who are governance minded?
I think echoing what Peter said, and different lens, I think same problems we're seeing is I see a lot more pickup in interest in information governance, because I think people started technology first and then realized, we didn't get the results we wanted because of the data we used. We didn't take time to put governance on it. We didn't take time to look at the quality. We just said, well, we've got volumes of it, so it'll all sort itself out in the end. And then and then people are realizing, no, actually, you need to sort it out first and then push it through AI and use that for training before we start to get the results we need. And then another thing we're really starting to see is privacy concerns. So we're getting our current privacy legislations in Canada haven't been touched in 20 plus years. We're starting to see more and more, not just interest from government officials to bring stuff in, but demand from people, and further people starting to require more or request more privacy or expect more out of their privacy from companies, I guess maybe is the word to use. And so the question then is, what have we been doing to protect privacy, and how can we improve that? So understanding those pieces as well has been very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's a bit of governance, which is like the application of like understanding where like everything lies and sorting and filtering, but then also governance in terms of privacy and making sure
Yeah.
that everyone's protected from all the craziness that's happening out there in the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I watched this very long YouTube video on how you can erase yourself from the internet, and the outcome was not what I wanted because it said you can only travel by car and you can't use really anything. And I was like, oh, great. Well,
Yeah.
if I wanted to become a
Yeah,
hermit.
exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, privacy legislation is always very important. So yeah. So
Yeah.
would you say that with the focus and the build out of like mass AI structures, would you say there's going to be an increased number of people who need to be focusing on the governance space?
I think so. Well, because before that, up until somewhat recently, I think people or organizations are releasing data as a byproduct. They go,
Mhm.
I sell things, and then I just get information about what products I sell. I deliver this service, whatever. Now organizations are starting to say, and I'm not talking about like selling people's data the way some companies do. I'm talking about organizations just like, how can I use this data? I want to use this data to be better at what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so to answer those questions, you need information governance. You need to be able to say, well, you can look into those things, or you can't use that data in that way. Or if you want to look at that data, here are all the problems you're going to have with our current processes. And if you want to start fixing that stuff, let's fix how we collect that data in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's a shift. As much as we can talk about AI and what's trendy, what isn't, I think that is a shift in how organizations run that is permanent. I don't think we'll ever go back to how it was before.
Yeah. And I think too, what's also really interesting is I think there was a legislation that passed in the US not too long, maybe a couple of years ago, where it shifted away from having like big conglomerate data brokers that would purchase people's information and then sell it and blah blah blah. And now it's shifted to be more of a retailer being able to utilize and capitalize on their data that they have and then selling that out. So and connecting them with vendors. There's a really great video essay that I watched about David's Bridal and how to get into David's Bridal, you have to provide them all this information, and then from that it like filters down, and so now wedding photographers can purchase the data set, venues can purchase it because they know your dates and your contact information, and so David's Bridal doesn't sell just dresses, it sells your information.
You're right. Yeah, it's funny as someone who works in privacy, and places do ask for that kind of information, and I'm getting married, and I'm going to David's Bridal, and they'll ask for things like, what's your gender? I go, you don't need to know that. I'm just buying a dress. You can. That's my business, not yours. Now we know why they want to know that. Yeah.
They and the most important customer that anyone can ever have is a person who's pregnant. That is the most valuable customer to be able to identify to any sort of person. So just some fun tidbits I pick up along the way through my video essay. So and no questions have there looks like there is one Q&A. Let's see what that says. So what do you think about the certifications offered in data? So there's a few different ones. PPDM, who is operating the Unlocking Data Careers, has a certification program that focuses on specifically oil and gas data certification, but there's a few other ones. So Peter, I'll turn to you. What do you think about the certification offered in data?
Yeah, well, and I would honestly like put this answer in the context of like any of the certifications that are out there, right? So like all the AWS or Azure, Databricks has a bunch, even Neo4j has them, and so on and so forth down the line, right? Not just PPDM, there's of course DAMA has their certifications, and there's so many. Oracle, again, you could go on and on and on and on, right? Sometimes job postings may explicitly say like you need to have this certification or that certification or other, right? Or specific degree or credential. Like sometimes you'll see that you actually do require a PEng or something like this, right? Again, it just depends. But outside of those where they strictly say like, you need this certification, Um, from my perspective, it's more often than not a matter of sending signals, right? So because you don't need certifications, but certifications do provide people a signal that, oh, you have some form of credentials that say, oh, you know how to use this tool, or you know how to work through this process, or you have a general sense of like this particular type of role or something like that, right? And again, mileage will vary. Not everyone will be looking for that. Some might be. And really, like if that's the kind of signal that you want to send, then you have to remember, like, okay, so I have this certification. So what? Like, what are you trying to say? Like, what are you like? How does that help build your story? How does that frame your story about who you are, what you're capable of doing, and in what way does it concretely apply to the role to which you're applying, right? So there is value in it, but at the same time, like I don't know that it's I don't there's an argument in social science where when you're making an argument or you're providing a list of things that like, oh yeah, these are the reasons, right? There's a sort of sufficient and necessary clauses. Is it
Mhm.
sufficient? No. Is it necessary? Also no. But in some cases it might be, right?
Yeah.
So again, it all depends on how you frame it and how you're couching yourself when you're
Yeah.
presenting yourself, and like, does it make sense to even list the thing on your resume for a particular job if it's not even related, right?
Yeah.
So again, it really, I don't know. I feel like it's a cop out answer, but it depends.
Yeah. May I add
Yeah,
something
of
to that?
course.
Actually, yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. So, because I think something that Peter's talked a lot about is translation and
Yeah.
translating things. What I found through my certifications that I received, did my boot camp. I also did the DAMA, and what I'm seeing from what you're offering, Blaine, there's more. It covers some similar things to DAMA, but it's giving the language. Lots of what I'm learning, lots of what I learned in DAMA, I was like, oh yeah. Now that you put it in words like that, that is what what I understand of things. But I through that certification, I'm able to, and when I go to interviews, I'm able to say, oh, yeah, this is what you're describing to me something, or this is what you're trying to say in my information governance speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah, the
Yeah.
certification is like letting everyone know that you read the book. It's like
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But that being said, as Peter said, like you could also sometimes read the book and the
Yeah.
certification is you don't need it per se,
Yeah.
but I find certifications are a fast track to getting the language I need
Hmm.
to talk about what I want to
Yeah.
talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did a whole course in project management. Never got the certification. Still got the skills.
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
So we have another great question. Coming from a non-traditional route, how difficult was it to learn and adapt to technical aspects of data management, such as Python and Power BI? So I'll just translate that to say, such as programming languages and analytic tools. Start with you, Megan.
Um, it was challenging. I think though, what I found is it's just framing, it's a different way of thinking. Like
Mm,
I have learned Python, I have learned SQL. And SQL, it's just kind of it's the order in which you structure your thoughts, and same with
yeah.
Python, the order in which you structure your thoughts. I wish I could remember there was a free book before I did so I did Code Academy before I did my boot camp.
Mhm.
But there was before I even did Code Academy, there was a really good book. And it's hard to find, but it's written by this guy who does CGI for like
Mhm.
movies.
Okay.
And it's talking about how do you think about your nouns and verbs in coding, and how
Ah,
it's just a little bit different than how you talk about nouns and verbs in English language. So did I find it hard? Yeah. I spend maybe about 4 hours a week digging into data where I need
mm,
that skill. I do very little of that. So a very rudimentary understanding takes you a long way in information governance. I think in
yeah.
Peter's space that would not be sufficient, but we do different things.
As if learning the English language wasn't hard enough. We have to learn about
Yes.
the reapplication of nouns
More
and verbs for
exceptions than
coding.
rules in that one, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why that makes learning those languages easier.
Yeah.
Less exceptions.
It's true.
Yeah, one rule to rule them all. Yeah.
Yeah, there isn't a there, or there.
Yeah.
There's only the
Oh.
one.
Yeah, goodness
What about
gracious.
for you, Peter? How when you were starting out, how difficult was it to adapt?
So yeah, like I guess mixed, because when I was in grad school, so like some of my courses they would have us use SPSS for like an analysis, and then in another one, oh well, we have to use because the professor happens to use Stata, right? And then another one was, oh well, you have to use R because that's what. So
Yeah.
on the one hand, I had a little bit of a leg up, if you will, just by virtue of having to at least rudimentarily figure out my way into these programming languages, right? And so, but with that said, though, I'm gonna agree with Megan and say that yeah, it is kind of hard because you're starting, like, it's like learning any new skill. If you're coming from, a background that might be related, similar, or not, as far as like the particular tool. So like again, programming languages or data visualization, that kind of stuff. Honestly, like the best thing I can say is, yes, it's hard, and it does take some time and dedication, and sometimes the easiest way to move through that and move forward is to find some way to, like, teach yourself, or like if you're using materials, going through courses, boot camps and stuff like that, like look also for opportunities to practice those new skills or to learn those new skills doing something that you find interesting, right? So like taking, for example, a data camp course, a lot of the kind of exercises will be, like, oh, here's writing a basic function and here's doing this basic thing or that basic thing or what have you, right? But then, like, think about, okay, well, I really like this idea of, I don't know, real estate, right? Like that's a common example that you'll see. Like real estate is interesting, housing prices or something like, I don't know, pick an interesting topic, right? And then just see, like, oh, are there data sets on that topic? And then see if you can kind of learn how to query that little data set using, your basic SQL skills that you're just starting to learn. Same thing with Python or R, or again, whatever skill you're trying to pick up, right? Is figuring out a way to apply, because then if you're doing it, that can help you learn faster for many people. Not everybody, I realize, but for some that does help. And otherwise, like, it's more interesting when it's a topic that's of interest to you than just like whatever the classroom textbook might provide you as the generic example that you have to learn for the test, right? Because then you're just memorizing, and are you really learning it? Maybe yes, maybe no, I don't know. Again, it depends on how you learn best. But that's
definitely learning the language and then continuing to use it. Because if you don't continue to apply yourself to the language, that you're going to like fall out of it. Which is why I no longer know how to write Python, is because, I learned it, I applied it, I had a lot of fun, and then life changes, and you stop speaking French. So I know that we are running a bit long, but this one question is really good. So this will be our final question for the day, and then we'll wrap it up. In today's job market, many companies are still posting data analyst positions, but the job descriptions include an overwhelming number of requirements. Does that mean that traditional data analyst roles are gradually disappearing? Should professionals focus on transitioning into data science or other fields instead? Should someone prepare for a successful career in data given the current job market? It's a big one.
Go ahead.
Honestly, I think that's a fantastic question, and it's a very important question to ask. My quick short answer will be that like I mentioned at the top of the session, a lot of these data posts and the job titles are meaningless. That your question, Shri, does point explicitly to something I have noticed also, in just using that generic analyst title to describe data engineers, to describe MLOps people, to describe data scientists. And so I think in some respects, so I don't think that the role is disappearing, but what it means is going to change from one job post to the next, right? So it'll still say data analyst, but does that mean that, you should sort of, build your moat and just say, well, I'm just going to be this or I'm just going to be that? That's one way, because specialization can be useful. Again, it depends on the job that you're looking for. On the other hand, right, there is a propensity for a lot of these roles to wear more than one hat. Like at Critical Mass, we do have dedicated data science talent people working for us, right? On my team, on other adjacent teams, that sort of thing. But also, some of my analysts are also running regressions or running principal components analysis or clustering or segmentation, if you will, in business terms. They are doing those things too, which when I was getting started out, that was exclusively the domain of data scientists like 6-7 years ago. Now it's not so much. Now data scientists are more about, neural networks and boosted tree models and other fancy shiny things. So yes, things are changing, things are evolving. So if nothing else, it does help to be aware of what these other things are, and like maybe having, some, dabbling in it so you can, speak to these kinds of new things or skills that are being listed under data analyst. But again, it's kind of like I'm kind of speaking out of both sides of my mouth here. I totally realize and I totally admit, right, that it's not just like on the one hand, no, like data analysts are still data analysts, but also there is some evolution going on, right? So like how that is defined, again, your mileage will vary depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
I think there is data creep. Like I think kind of what you're seeing is data creep. Data is creeping down.
Yeah.
And I think what I've seen over my career is what we used to call a data analyst is now what we just call a business analyst. There's an expectation that even just regular business analysts are able to work with data more. So if you want that traditional data analyst role, maybe you actually want to be looking for the words business analyst. You want to be looking in that space.
Yeah, business intelligence.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another buzzword I've seen coming up again and again. Business intelligence. So
as opposed to reporting analyst, which is once upon a time, I remember that being ubiquitous.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us today and like walking through everything in your history and your ideas. That really means a lot. And for everyone on the call today, thank you for joining us. And of course, the registration is open for the 5-day course or for the asynchronous 30-hour online learning. There's a wait list for September and there's a wait list for August. So keep applying for that wait list, and we'll hopefully get another class from here in Calgary programmed, and still lots of space in Edmonton. And so the courses occur Monday through Friday. So the in-person is Monday through Friday, lunch is included. And then for the online courses, everything is going to be asynchronous. You can do it at your own pace, but there will be some deadlines. And if you're not actively participating in your learning, I will be actively participating and removing you from the course. So keep that in mind. So that hopefully that answers your question. And it's and the system that we're using for the online course does allow for some online networking and community building as well. So again, thank you, Meghan and Peter, for joining us today. And thank you, everyone, for coming through the Data Demystified series. It's been really great. If you want to watch back any of them, they're available on the PPDM YouTube channel. All right.
Great.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Good luck, everyone.
Cheers.